All right, on 10.2, we're going to be looking at long division and then also synthetic division. So on the front, we're looking at long division. Long division is something that you've already gone over when you were younger, but we're going to put some variables with it. So notice we have a polynomial on top. We're dividing it by a binomial here. Okay, so the denominator always goes on the outside, and then your numerator always goes on the inside. So x cubed minus 5x squared plus 4x minus 2. Okay, so we're going to divide this. So notice we have two terms that we're dividing by, x minus 2. So we need to look at these first two terms, and our answer will go right above that. Okay? So first off, you need to look at this first term and this first term. Figure out what you need to multiply by in order to get that x cubed. So we would need to do x times x squared in order to get x cubed. So once you find that term, you're going to multiply it by both of them. So that would be x cubed, and then x squared times a negative 2 would be a negative 2x squared. Okay, so on long division, whenever you find that answer, even if you're just dealing with numbers, you subtract these two from the two at the top. So I'm going to change that to minus, change that to plus, because we're subtracting a negative there. So then you'll combine them. X cubed minus x cubed is 0. Negative 5x squared plus 2x squared is a negative 3x squared. Once you get what's left, then you'll bring down the next term.
Teacher, pardon this interruption. Anyone who is in band, academics,
okay, so then the next part,
UIL, who will be getting a letter.
We want to look at the first term and then the first term again.
Anyone who is athletics who has not already been sized needs to go as well. So any remaining students who have a letter.
Okay, so when I do x will go into, or x times what will give you negative 3x squared. That would give you negative 3x. So negative 3x times x is a negative 3x squared. And then a negative 3x times a negative 2 is a positive 6x. So again, you have to subtract both of those. So that's going to be a positive now, and that will be a negative. So the x squared will cancel. 4x plus a negative 6x is a negative 2x. And then we bring down that very last term. So let me start over. We look at this first term and this first term. What can we multiply x by to get negative 2x? And that would be negative 2. So when you distribute it, you get negative 2x. And then a negative 2 times a negative 2 is a positive 4. And then we're changing the sign of each because we're having to subtract both of those. So those cancel on the x's, and you end up with a negative 6. Now notice we don't have any more terms to bring down, so this is our remainder. Okay, so our answer when we divide it is x squared minus 3x minus 2. We have a remainder of negative 6. Your remainder needs to be out of your original denominator, which is x minus 2. And that would be our answer. So it's just like long division with just numbers and no variables, doing the same exact thing, but here we're adding the variables in it. Okay, so number 2, doing the same thing. 3x minus 1 needs to go on the outside. We have a 9x cubed plus 15x squared. Now, notice here, after x squared should come an x, and there's not an x there. So instead of just skipping over it, I'm going to put a 0x. That'll help me once I'm combining like terms when I'm dividing here. And then bring down your minus 2. Okay, looking at the first terms. 3x times what gives us 9x cubed? That would be 3x squared. When you multiply 3x squared times 3x, you get 9x cubed. 3x squared times a negative 1 is a negative 3x squared. Okay, most common mistake is forgetting to subtract both of those, which changes the sign of both of them. So the 9x cubes cancel, 15x squared plus 3x squared is 18x squared. And then we're bringing down the next term, which is really nothing. It's 0x, just 0x. Okay, looking at your first term, 3x times, that would be 6x, would give you 18x squared. And then 6x times a negative 1 would be a negative 6x. Again, you have to subtract both of them, so it changes the sign of both. And so you're left with 6x and then minus 2. So 6x and 3x, we're going to get a positive 2, which will be 6x, and then negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2. Again, don't forget to subtract them, so change the sign of each. Notice our remainder here is 0. So when we divide, we get 3x squared plus 6x plus 2. Once you get that answer, since you don't have a remainder, you could check it by multiplying by your denominator, and then it should give you back your numerator once you combine your like terms. Okay, so that's using long division, dividing polynomials. Now we're going to look at a different method. We're going to divide by using synthetic division. This one, everyone seems to like a little more than long division, but there's lots of steps that you have to remember. Your first step is to set your denominator equal to 0 and solve for x. So x would be 4. That number goes on the outside here. Block it off. And then right here are going to be your coefficients of your numerator. So we have an x to the 4th. That coefficient is a 1. So write a 1 there. X cubed, the coefficient's negative 2. Make sure you bring the negative with the 2. X squared would be next. Notice there's not an x squared. We have to, on synthetic, if there is something that's missing in the middle, you have to put a 0 or it's not going to work. So then coefficient of x is negative 31, and then your constant, which is your number without the variable, is negative 4. Okay, you're going to leave a little space right after your coefficients and then draw a horizontal line. We're always going to bring down our first coefficient, which is 1 on this one. You're going to multiply the coefficient times the 4, which we found at the beginning. 4 times 1, which would be 4, and that answer goes here. Once you have a number below that coefficient, you're going to be adding them together. Negative 2 plus 4, you get positive 2. Then you'll start over and you'll multiply the 4 times 2. That would give you 8. 0 plus 8 is 8. Then multiply 4 times 8, you get 32. You're adding those to get positive 1. Then 4 times 1, you get 4. And then negative 4 plus 4 is 0. Block off your last number. That will always be your remainder. So we do not have a remainder on this one. If you'd use long division, you should end up with the same answer. Now, when you're using synthetic, the answers that you get, these numbers, are coefficients. So to the left of your remainder will be the constant, because that's always your last number. Then to the left of that is x. To the left of that is x squared, and then x cubed. So work your way from the right to the left to figure out what coefficient it is. So when we divide it, we end up getting 1x cubed. It's a positive 2, so plus 2x squared. It's a positive 8, so plus 8x. And then positive 1, so plus 1. We do not have a remainder, so that is our answer. Just like on the last one that we didn't have a remainder, To check it, we can multiply it by our original denominator, and then once we distribute and then combine like terms, it should give us back the numerator. So this is another way of dividing polynomials. So long division on the front, synthetic division on the back. Okay, last one, we're still using synthetic. So the first step is to set your denominator equal to 0, solve for x. So x would be 3. Coefficients, we have a 2, a -6, a 1, -3, and -3. Notice we don't have any zeros on this one because there wasn't a term missing in the middle. We started with x to the 4th, then we had an x cubed, an x squared, an x, and then a constant. So we shouldn't have a 0 unless there's something missing. Okay, to get started, we're always bringing down the first coefficient. I'm going to multiply 3 times 2 to give me 6. I'm adding these to get 0. And then multiply. 3 times 0, we get 0. 1 plus 0 is 1. 3 times 1 is 3. -3 plus 3 is 0. And 3 times 0 is 0. So we end up with -3 there. Remember that last one is your remainder. To the left of your remainder is your constant. To the left of that is x. To the left of that is x squared. And then x cubed. So we have a 2x cubed. Notice we have a 0x squared. I do not need to write that. Next would be just a plus x. And I do have a remainder of -3. Remember, your remainder is out of your original denominator, which was x minus 3. Okay, so on synthetic division, there's 2 things that I see a common mistake on. Forgetting the 0 for the placeholder for whatever is missing. And then also, on synthetic, it doesn't reduce it to the simplest form for you. Okay, so you always need to check once you've used synthetic to see if you can reduce. So an example of that, because you'll see it on the assignment, would be 2x squared plus 4x plus 6. Notice all of those can be divided by 2, so you would write x squared plus 2x plus 3 for your answer. So on long division, it gives you the simplest form, but on synthetic, you have to go another step and simplify it if you can divide it all by the same number. So make sure that you're doing that on your assignment. Also on your assignment, it'll tell you long division or synthetic, so make sure that you're using the correct method.